right off the bat from what I learned about you a few days ago is the nickname that you've earned in the industry. It's called the inventory detective. So I want to hear all about that. Like, where did that name come from? What's the story behind it? Everything
Yes.
on LinkedIn. But I would love to hear from you if you can tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on and how your journey has been within this industry, and just a quick a little about you.
Yeah. So, the journey is, never what you plotted out to be. I didn't.
So, from your experience over the years, what has been that one early red flag that, leaders tend to ignore? And what really happens if they don't really act on it?
So I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball in here.
From your point of view, what are some of the process improvements that you have seen, that deliver the best ROI?
Right. Well, that is a great question.
A surprising insight that, you have heard from one of these ad hoc meetings that you've gone into over the years, and you're just like, wait, that's
Oh,
the one. That's the
wow.
one we're gonna use.
A quarterly business review because we had a terrible scorecard. Terrible scorecard. We were the
Yeah.
worst vendor out of 7 vendors for this carrier.
That's amazing. That sounds like a movie plot, right? Like, go get in the airplane and you're gonna get, fire people. But the journey that you've
Yeah.
had is like amazing.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone to the Vserve e-business solution podcast on supply chain management, where we invite some of the industry's great experts to talk about their experiences and gather some helpful tips along the way. And I'm Cynthia. So today we have a guest who has been at the forefront of operational transformation for over 15 years. He's
Mhm.
known for his dynamic operations, fractional leadership, and a proven track record of implementing practical and sustainable solution across manufacturing and supply chain functions. So please help me in joining Jacques Fradet. I'm saying it right, I hope this time. So Jacques, it's
Yes.
a pleasure
Yes,
to
you
have you.
are. Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Appreciate
Perfect.
it.
Thank you so
Great.
much for joining, Jacques.
Well,
And
thank you. Thank you, Cynthia, for having me join the podcast. I appreciate it. I hope I can add some value to the listeners and to the audience. And so yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited. And I want to start right off the bat from what I learned about you a few days ago is the nickname that you've earned in the industry. It's called the inventory detective. So I want to hear all about that. Like, where did that name come from? What's the story behind it? Everything.
Yeah, so actually that was something that I was named by a former employee, and it's probably comes from my insistence over the years that as a foundation of the work that we do in supply chain, as unglamorous as inventory can be, that really you have to spend a lot of time. You got to make sure your inventory is correct, and
Mhm.
if that is not correct, then you do run into problems. All your strategies sometimes can be for nothing. I probably have annoyed people enough over the years. Maybe detective is one of the nicer things that people have called me about when it comes to inventory. So yeah, I like to get into that and make sure that that's all good. And then after that, it's clear sailing for really doing all the strategic things that you want to do in supply chain.
That's amazing. It's so nice to kind of work with, our coworkers who kind of understand that, what you're known for and what you're truly effective in. And, I have read throughout your professional, career that you've had on LinkedIn, but I would love to hear from you if you can tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on and how your journey has been within this industry, and, just a quick a little about you.
Yeah, so the journey is never what you plotted out to be. I didn't expect to become a supply chain person. In fact, I kind of fell into it about over 15, almost 20 years ago. I had gotten my MBA. I'd started out as an engineer, and I thought, well, I want to be a finance person because I think that's where all the action is.
Mhm.
I thought, well, this is going to be great, and I'm going to be in the finance world. And so I did work in finance for about 4 or 5 years. I happened to be working for a small company, and the I was reporting to the CFO, and the CFO walked into my office and said, "Hey, I just fired the whole executive team in supply chain and operations, so I need you to take it over." And he knew that I had worked a lot with them, and
Uh-huh.
so yes, and I was told to get on an airplane and go fire some more people, and it was one of those crazy moments, and I thought, well, this is not what I expected at all, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so and you're like, I don't know if I like this. And you can imagine the personal turmoil, your life, you don't realize. I look back on it now, and my life totally changed in that moment. I just didn't
Yeah.
realize it. And so I had to take over supply chain and operations. And I was quickly on an airplane to Israel 3 months after 9/11 to chase down some parts that we needed. So it was just absolutely crazy time. But and the point of me saying all this, the reality is that for me, the reason why I stayed in supply chain after that and never looked back is because I realized after that how critical it was, and that my role in supply chain and operations was actually having a greater impact than what I had been doing. Again, I love finance, and believe me, I have great partnerships with finance people. But for me personally, as a former engineer and somebody who had done manufacturing, I thought, I can add more value, and so that's what
Mhm.
I did. And just to give you, you did ask the question about what I've been doing lately. So I am part of a private equity firm. I'm a member of a private equity firm, and we purchased a company almost a couple of years ago, and had nothing to do with high tech that I'd been working with my my whole career, and electronics and things like that. And
Mhm.
we transformed a company. We're still in the process of transforming it, but a lot of the transformation is done. And this is a company that there's no electronics. It's all stainless steel and aluminum security windows and doors. And
Mhm.
so, and what's fantastic about that is that what you find out by doing something like this is that the same process improvements that worked on in a totally different industry, they apply.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
concepts that you learn in supply chain, they're totally transferable to multiple industries. And so it's been a great experience. And the result of it is that without really increasing much in the way of sales and customer dealers, the revenue for the first year that we were doing this went up by 50%, 50%. So, and
Mhm.
again, that was all operational, well, virtually all operational improvement. So that's a very, kind of fulfilling, sort of thing. So yeah.
That's amazing. That sounds like a movie plot, right? Like, "Go get in the airplane, and you're gonna get, fire people." But the journey that you've
Yeah.
had is, like, amazing.
Yeah, there are things that you do throughout a career that you really question, and some that you don't you really can't evaluate until a significant amount of hindsight, and not everything is pleasant, and but hopefully the end result for most of the people and the companies you work for is something good. You know that your intent is good, and you hope
Yeah.
that follows through, right? And
Well,
people benefit.
this is a perfect segue then. If, you've mentioned that, there's a time in a company where they don't realize that they've outgrown, their operations until it's too late, and they have to kind of bring in somebody and be like, "You're doing it now."
Right.
So, from your experience over the years, what has been that one early red flag that, leaders tend to ignore, and what really happens if they don't really act on it?
Well, so I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball in here. So one of the things that I have found is that really is creates a big problem is that, especially with smaller and mid-sized companies, and they're trying to
Mhm.
grow, and they want to grow so desperately, and of course for good reason, because the larger you are, the less risk you have in operations moving forward. And
Yeah.
so of course it's a very important thing to do. The problem that I've seen is that companies, that are smaller or mid-size often try to be all things for all people. And so what ends up happening is that even opportunities that are not as really, again, and the benefit of hindsight is wonderful, right? But you look at the opportunities and you say to yourself, "Are is this really worth?" Chasing down? Do we really have a
Mhm.
firm order? Is this customer, how much are they going to order in the future? And is this sustainable? Is this going to be a good product? Is
Mhm.
everybody going to like this? Is it going to last? And so what ends up happening very often is you see companies, and it's really tough on the supply chain person, especially
Yeah,
because you have to go chase down now these opportunities that may not be as lucrative as anybody thought they were going to be. And so to me,
exactly.
that is the biggest challenge. And the reality is that it's not really, in hindsight, that's how you really find out whether or not something was worth pursuing. Sometimes there are early warning signs, but it's very difficult to do. So you really
Yeah.
have to think about it quite a bit. Is this worth chasing? And if you do
Mhm.
chase something that doesn't materialize, you end up with a big inventory problem. There, I get back to inventory now.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
that was going to happen, and so your costs go up and the revenues don't materialize. And so you know what
Mhm.
that is. You don't, you see something like that on a P&L, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, the company suffers and all the employees suffer, and it's really sad, unfortunately, and it can take a
Yeah.
long time to get out of that. So really evaluating your opportunities is really, realistically, and being
Mhm.
very careful in how you approach it, a little bit at a time instead of,
Mhm.
betting the farm on it, as they say. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. The being realistic part. Like it's so hard
Mhm.
for companies, especially now with so many, services and products and things out there with AI and everything. It's so hard to be, realistic and also think about efficiency, think about your ROI. And many
Mhm.
businesses today are so much under pressure to increase these things without, sacrificing quality and
Mm.
service and stuff like that. So from your point of view, what are some of the process improvements that you have seen, that deliver the best ROI?
Right. Well, that is a great question, and I know that there are a lot of people out there who will insist on, Six Sigma, value stream mapping, all
Mhm,
these things, right? And there are many buzzwords, and a lot of these processes, they just come together, right? One is a subset of the other, and one of those things. So I have had the benefit of, I look back on it now, and I really had the benefit of working for three Japanese companies, and I would say that it was so process improvement was so inherent that even the things that you think about as, like 5S and things like that, I
mhm,
would never hear them actually talking about the buzzwords. It was just such a part of their culture. And I would
mhm,
say, but for people who are studying Six Sigma and all the various process improvement things, and hopefully people that are listening to this podcast, they're
mhm,
probably going to be aware of a lot of, some of the words out there. And so the one that I would say that has been the most useful for me is what's called the SIPOC, which SIPOC is an acronym for Supplier Input Process Output Customer. And what
mhm,
I have found is that that is step number one when you are leading a team or you're part of a team. The all the SIPOC does for you, all that process does, which is well documented in all the Six Sigma literature. What it
mhm,
does for you is it enables people to get into a conference room and have a brainstorming, free conversation and draw things on the board, not worry about numbers, and get
mhm,
all the team's ideas out there, because getting the team's input, and you really, it has to work for the whole team. And
exactly.
there are things that you find out, especially in this very, somewhat siloed modern, company environment that we get in. Sometimes you find out that somebody has really some important information about a process, right? You're working on a process with many people, and sometimes across borders, all over the world, and it's really
Mhm,
important to find out what they're experiencing and getting their input. So if you can get people into a room and kind of do this SIPOC process, right? You get them to brainstorm brainstorm. And then
Mhm.
what you do as the Six Sigma person or the supply chain person is you start to then structure it into this supplier input, process, output, customer framework. And you
Mhm.
create then a succession of these processes and define it that way. A lot of times you find out that without having done a lot of super complex statistical analysis, which again has its place, of course. But
Mhm.
again, that ability to just get into a conference room, to quickly
Mhm.
get people together and do
Yeah.
an ad hoc meeting, you have to be able to do that step number one, and people have to be feel comfortable doing it. That makes everything else afterwards
Yeah.
possible. So yeah, so that's my favorite one actually. It's not the end all, but I do believe that that ability to get everybody on the team together and brainstorm and value everybody's input, that is
Mhm.
just very important to do. So yeah.
That's great. That's amazing. And I think so that kind of, brings up the next point, I guess, is
Mm.
what's one, surprising insight that, you have heard from one of these ad hoc meetings that you have gone into over the years and you're just like, wait, that's
Oh,
the one. That's the
wow.
one we're gonna use.
Well, I'll tell you what, I so the funny thing is that what I have found is just by doing this simple process, yeah, you can find out things that are amazing. So I'll give you one little story here. Several years ago, I
Yeah.
was working for a company that was making cell phones, and we were selling to T-Mobile, actually a T-Mobile subsidiary.
Mhm.
And so what happened was is that I was told to show up to a quarterly business review because we had a
Mhm.
terrible scorecard. We were the
Yeah.
worst vendor out of 7 vendors for this, carrier,
Mhm.
for on-time delivery, and I thought to myself, "Well, this is crazy," but the customer's telling me that I'm doing terrible. I am the worst, and it just turns out that we really weren't the worst, but once I sat down with the team and also sat down with the customer, I
Mhm.
found out that if we simply notified them the day before that a delivery was not gonna be made, that would
Solve everything.
remove yeah, it removed everything. And
Yeah.
then and so that by itself, I remember we were 64% on time delivery, and I thought we were well over 90%, and the
Mhm.
best in class was, 98, 99%. And I thought, so we just by doing that, just by letting them know, we our
Mhm.
on time delivery increased from 64% to over 90%.
Mhm.
Almost like within a month, very, very, very fast, right? Once we started, making sure we did this every time if we were gonna miss a delivery by a day. And so
Yeah.
then the rest of it required statistical analysis. To get from like 90-ish percent to 98%,
Mhm.
that required value stream mapping and all of that stuff. So, but that initial aha moment came from just asking somebody on the team,
Yeah.
please explain your process to me. And then what we
Mhm.
ended up doing was we found out that we did need to improve our just statistically that things do happen, and
Mhm.
there are delays through customs or whatever, and
Mhm.
with transportation, and it just turns out we changed our ordering process, all of our purchase orders with our contract manufacturer by 1 week, by just 1 week. And that
Yeah.
we so 2 quarters later, we go to the same quarterly business review and we were number one. We went from
That's great.
worst to first in 6 months. And all I can say is, again, that was, first of all, listening to people, right?
Mhm.
And asking questions. Don't assume you know everything. And
Yeah.
then you had to do a little bit of, statistical analysis, as you would expect with a value stream map or anything like that
Mhm.
with Six Sigma. So yeah. So that was one of those. And of course, so 6 months later, I went from from being, criticized to, I was the hero. And,
Yeah.
and so was my team. I had a fairly large team. So I was, fortunate that, for everybody's assistance, obviously. So yeah,
That's such an amazing story, and it's such a simple thing, right? Communication, just transparency at
it
that
is
time.
amazing. Yeah.
Crazy. Perfect, perfect. So, I guess to your point, right? We often hear that in supply chain, success is mostly about planning. You have to, every number
Mhm.
tells a different story. And you've also mentioned that there's like always that one metric that, signals you something's about to like go. There's a problem here. Fix it. This
Right.
is the red flag. So,
Right.
like, what's that one number for you that you have seen over the years pop at you every single time you've gone into new engagements?
Yes, and you I think you know what I'm going to say based on our previous
Inventory.
conversations, but it's inventory. Yeah, I like to say to people, I'm not sure they like hearing it, but inventory is the canary in the coal mine, as the saying goes.
Mhm,
As soon as, and the proper inventory level, depends on your company, depends on many things. But if you have an expected inventory amount and all of a sudden it starts to increase, both like on your own books or even at the as they call it off balance sheet inventory that has been ordered and is owned by your contract manufacturer, if you're
yeah,
using a contract manufacturer, if their inventory starts to go up again, that is your eventually that is your obligation. And
yeah,
as soon as you see things going inventory going up, it's one of two things: either you've bought the wrong material, right? There's been a shift in the mix, in the product mix for your company,
mhm,
or you have a production problem, right? The production,
mhm,
for whatever reason, has been down, and so you want to know about these early warning signs. So you definitely
mhm,
want to be looking for that. And sometimes it's doesn't things get corrected and all that, but you definitely want to know early on, do I need to be looking at this? Is And then you do have to take swift action, because
mhm,
even if the problem, as a supply chain professional or operations professional, you, regardless of what the original root cause was, it could have been a bad forecast, it could have been all sorts of things,
mhm.
or production is down, it basically comes back to you. You are responsible, whether you like it or not. You're
Yeah,
responsible for those outcomes, for bad outcomes. And so you really need to be looking at inventory. And
mhm.
so yeah, that's there are other things you can look at, but I will say this: I've seen people look at, they try to follow like 30 different KPIs or metrics,
Yeah,
and I sit there and I go, "You really don't need to look at that many." I don't know if one is enough. There are
yeah.
probably, you can look at more than one metric, just, inventory levels, but certainly that one has to be part of it for sure, in my opinion.
Now I understand why you're called the inventory detective, 'cause that's like the main idea, right? Like, everything comes down to the main so how can business strike the right balance between, like, availability of the product or overstock risk? Like, what's the
Mhm.
right balance?
Right. Well, I think one of the things that, you are one of the benefits, right, of being in supply chain and operations, that a lot of
Mhm,
the work that we do is structured and repetitive and assisted by, machines and,
mhm,
technology, ERP, MRP. Uh, and if, just in case anybody in the audience doesn't know, ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, and MRP, Materials Resource Planning. And Materials
mhm,
Resource Planning, MRP, is within the vast majority of any ERP system today, and it's a tremendous number cruncher. It does a tremendous amount of work for you. It's fantastic. But
mhm,
the problem is that you you have all these processes that are kind of black and white and quantified. And sometimes what you really need to do, in fact I would say all the time, what you need to do as a supply chain professional, is that you need to look at then the beyond your area. And I think one of
mhm,
the biggest things that you can do is get involved in demand planning. You have to have a very good working relationship with your sales team. And if you have a
mhm,
sales operations team, usually that, also works well. Not every company has, strictly a sales operations team, but when you have a good relationship with the sales team, and you understand their demand, then that
Mhm.
helps. When you have a purchase order, usually when you are driving materials in supply chain, it comes from two sources. It comes from firm purchase orders from your customer, or you the other part of it is a forecast because your salespeople can't they don't sometimes they just can't close the deal
Yeah.
until very late, and so you have to understand they're under a lot of pressure, and they're trying to close a deal, but once they close a deal it needs to be delivered like immediately, so
Yeah.
they supply you with a forecast, and
Mhm.
really need to understand. You can't just take that forecast and then load MRP, hit a button and go, okay, let's buy everything. You really
Yeah.
have to, make sure you understand it really well. And what I have found over time, there is a process that I created, and it's one of those things that I hope that everybody would take advantage of, and it's not that difficult to do.
Yep.
So when
Yep.
you're
Go ahead.
working with a sales team, there you have to understand that they are trying to work the best deal possible, and they often don't get that purchase order from the customer until very late. So
Yep.
they provide you with a forecast to the best of their ability of the deals they believe they're going to close within a certain period of time. And
Mhm.
so what you need to do is, help them out so that they don't over forecast. Sometimes, that is I'd say that is more typical. Again, they're under pressure. You got to understand that. Of course, they're under pressure to get the revenue.
Mhm.
They have revenue targets. And so you need to support them by letting them know that if they come up with some additional revenue or volume, that you're going to be able to support it in a reasonable period of time. So what I did was, having used MRP so much during my career, especially in the early part of my career, I developed what we called, at one company I worked for, we called it the what if process. So what I would do here is, if the forecast seemed just crazy, right? They believed they were going to close every deal, and we certainly hoped they would. But I could
Yeah.
tell that, if they closed every deal, we'd be making so much more money than anybody thought we would be making. So what
Yeah.
I would do is I would run basically a mini MRP process. And it's
Mhm.
kind of technical, but you run that, you work with your IT folks. Again, this is working cross functionally with your other team members in other groups, and you set up a system in another environment, or they call it
Mhm.
an instance, and you run the business in there, and you can fool around because it's not connected to anything financial, right? So you can
Mhm.
just mess around in this space that the IT folks create for you. And what you do is you run MRP, you run kind of a abbreviated MRP, and what would happen is, the salespeople would come up to me and say, "Hey," after a while, they'd come up to me, instead of just loading it in the forecast and me not
Yeah.
knowing what this was about. What happened instead was they'd come to me and say, "Hey, I'm working on a deal to sell, an extra 100,000 units of this product. Um, if I were to get you you know that order in the next 2 weeks, how soon could I get?" you know, something shipped to the customer.
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah.
would run based on materials we already had. I would run what if process. I would run an abbreviated MRP, and I could usually get them an answer within a couple hours if I could get to it right away. And they would love it. They would remove it from the forecast. And,
Yeah.
because if you can say to them, "Hey, I can get you 25% of what they ordered within 4 weeks, and then
Mhm.
the other amount and you just give them that kind of estimate, then they
Yeah.
they breathe better, because again, they want to be able to make, commitments to customers, which we all need,
Yeah.
and have it be realistic and have them be satisfied. So
Yeah.
it's very important. Demand planning, having a very good relationship with your sales team, very important. So,
So I'm from sales. I've been in sales for over
mm,
10 plus years. So this thing really like made me happy to hear because
oh, good.
that's true. Like it's really like it there that's all it is. If you let us know what we can deliver, we will make
Right.
it happen, right? So thank you
Yeah.
so much for that. And I guess, kind of coming back to the whole operations and there's so many, like everyone talks about streamline your operations, make it effective. And sometimes the advice floating around everywhere is either like really outdated or just flat out it's wrong. Like
Right.
you cannot be doing that. So, what's a popular belief in operations or supply chain management that you completely disagree with? That you've heard over the years that you're like, okay, that's wrong. Let's not do
Well, that is a really good question.
that.
I think actually, again, as a supply chain person and operations person, you are so important to the outcome of the company, and you should be questioning everything. I would say, one of the things that people tend to believe in without and I did have a situation like this at a company I worked for a few years ago. And again, as so many times, I was hired as a consultant and then ended up uh, staying for a long time. And they decided that they automatically wanted to outsource. And
Hmm.
after I joined the company, so there was some resistance. As always, there is the case when you have people who are already internally doing the job, and
Yeah.
somebody comes by and says, especially as a consultant, you can be put in that position of, people don't like losing their jobs, of course, right? And you feel for that, and a lot of these people do add a lot of value, but a company might want to just outsource for many reasons, right? Reduce
Hmm.
costs and things like that. So what happens is what you do is you want to make sure that everybody understands that there's actually a real financial benefit. And
Hmm.
in that case, what happened was we did end up outsourcing, even though there was a terrific team with the group that was internal to the company. But I
Hmm.
am the one who had to do the financial analysis because it hadn't been done. They just believed it was going to be better to outsource. It turns out they
Hmm.
were correct, which is great. But again, it was important to prove to the team that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
The flip side, though, is that there was another company I worked for a few years before, and they had outsourced already before I took over that team. They had
Hmm.
outsourced the repair function, the customer service and repair function. And it was a foregone conclusion that this is the way it needed to be. And
Hmm.
what I found out is that we had such a special, unique product and a special, unique customer base that
Hmm.
having somebody externally do it, and it didn't help that that company that we outsourced that had been outsourced to was on the East Coast and we were on the West Coast, so that didn't help either. But we ended up bringing it internally because it needed that care. It needed there were
Hmm.
so many there instead of being kind of a very simple process to determine if something was needed to be repaired or not repaired, in
Hmm.
warranty, out of warranty, it just turned out that it required sometimes a lot more analysis. And
Yep.
I had a couple of manufacturing engineers on my staff, and so these people who were constantly on the phone, now we
Hmm.
brought it internally, and we could just go downstairs and take a look at something for ourselves. And so we
Yep.
learned a lot. But
Hmm.
yeah, that had been, as you probably know, some people feel like, well, automatically you should outsource everything. And some people want to do it internally all the time.
Yep.
And that's a very difficult decision to make. But generally speaking, like I said, if the customer's experience is going to be improved by bringing
Hmm.
it in-house and taking care of it yourself, then you really want to bring that in. And the funny thing is that I was at CES after we brought it back in to the company. I happened that year, I forget what year it was. I was at CES, and we
Hmm.
got in the car with this Uber driver, and it turns out he had our cell phone, and he had
Wow.
had an experience where he had to return. There was a problem with his phone, and we're
Mhm.
sitting there in the car, and we thought, wow, that's fantastic. So he told us the whole story, and of course we gave him a great tip at the end. We were so thrilled, that
Mhm.
that's something that we had, that we were hearing it directly from an end user customer, that
Yep.
something that we had decided to do to improve the customer experience, actually worked, right?
Worked.
It
Yeah.
wasn't on a survey, it wasn't anything like that. It was this person just you know, without being asked, he just, we said, "Hey, that phone, that's our phone." And he said, "Oh, wow." And he starts telling us this story. And I thought, wow, and so, yeah, like I said, we gave him a big tip. It was completely, we were so thrilled to hear firsthand from a customer. So, yeah, the customer experience, even, you're a little bit removed from that as a supply chain person. You don't talk to the customer all the time, but really, it's really about the customer's experience.
Exactly.
You have to get to know that.
Yeah, and there's such a critical balance to maintain when it comes to these kind of outsourcing and relocation, even restructuring, like your production to kind of achieve those goals. So I know you have led many companies through different types of transformation in multiple different areas. How do you assess whether a company should outsource these services or relocate now or restructure their production? Like, what's that one thing you do?
Right. Well, there has to be a financial basis for it, for one thing.
Mhm,
And sometimes that's clear cut and sometimes it's not. But like, I was saying a few minutes ago, the if is the customer going to notice? Is there something that you're doing that is very specific that really only people internally can do?
mhm,
Because, for several reasons, and if really it's something that really most other companies can do, because it's more generic, and they might even be able to do it better, of course, because this is what they do every day, right? So contract
yeah,
manufacturer, for example, if they're doing that every day, they're probably going to do a better job than you setting up your own manufacturing. And
mhm,
so, so I would say those two things. There has to be a financial reason, and secondly, the customer has to have, based on your decision to outsource, bring it in-house, or relocate, they have to have a better experience. And
mhm,
so these are the keys. And the difficulty with that is that, like I was saying in my previous story there, where the story is of two different companies and their situations. It just
mhm,
turns out that it's not a black and white answer very often. It's
yeah,
you and sometimes you don't realize all the benefit that you thought you were going to get, and it's not that you don't have an infinite number of possibilities. It's
yeah,
and by the way, sometimes it's a hybrid thing where you do move something and you hire somebody locally because there's something specific that
mhm,
you need to address every single day. And so, I've done that also. So yeah, that's a very difficult question, to answer for
yeah,
anybody at any time. But fortunately, you're not faced with that challenge every day either. You make a
yeah,
decision and you evaluate it, and then you move on, and hopefully you establish that supply chain and geographical location, and that lasts you for for quite a few years. So
mhm.
yeah.
Perfect. Well, this has been such an informative podcast, Jacques. But before I let you go, any final words, for founders, for operators, for future leaders in supply chain, navigating through these different industrial changes, especially with AI in the picture, kind of reshaping the way we do operations over the years. What is, that one piece of advice you find yourself giving to young leaders out there?
Yeah, what I would say is realize you're important. You are extremely important to the success of the company. And
Mhm,
I would say that supply chain wasn't even a thing 20, 25 years ago that much. Very few people use the word supply chain.
mhm,
And, when I started working in supply chain, people were just starting to really use that, just the same way that now you hear because of COVID, everybody's heard of supply chain now, right? Well, that
yeah,
evolution within the industry, within, manufacturing companies, that happened 20 to 25 years ago, where people started talking about supply chain, and
mhm,
supply chain in many ways became more important than operations in some
Mhm.
ways. I don't want to go that far, but I'm just saying it became very important. And the thing to
Mhm.
realize is that yes, you are very important. And one of the reasons why you're very important is that you control, as they call it, the purse strings. You are a buyer and you have that ability to determine whether or not somebody gets a sale. So there's a salesperson on the other end that you're interacting with and they want your business. So you have
Mhm.
a tremendous amount of power, and it's very important to realize that, exercise it responsibly, and
Yeah.
do a great job for the company because you're just going to have a tremendous impact. So yeah, I think it's just a fantastic thing, and with AI coming, um, I do believe. Again, I remember years ago, people thought that with the use of MRP, which was not widely used over 20 years ago, it was used, but not as much as certainly it is now. And
Mhm.
people thought that MRP was going to destroy jobs, and it didn't
Yeah.
whatsoever. It actually kind of created supply chain. And so with AI, it's going to be, the same thing. It's another tool that you want to master, and don't forget that you really need to collaborate with those salespeople and your vendors. Get to know all the relationships,
Yeah.
and use AI, to your advantage, to speed up whatever solutions you come up with. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say. Yeah.
That's amazing. You're important. So thank
Yes.
you. Thank you so much for this conversation, Jacques. This was
Well,
one of
thank
the
you,
best podcasts
Cynthia.
I've done in a
Wow.
while.
Thank you so much. No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And yeah,
I'm
you
glad.
know,
I'm glad. And your insights have been like so wonderful to hear, even for me as a salesperson. I'm pretty sure for everyone out there who are in operation, one way or the other, it's an incredible value we earned today.
okay,
So
thank
thank
you. I
you so
appreciate it.
much for
And
sharing your
thank you
time and
for being the
expertise.
host. You were wonderful. These are great questions. So
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much. Thank you.
All
It
right.
was great having you here, Jacques. Thank you again for your time.
All
You
right.
have a good
Thank you,
day.
Cynthia. All right. You too.